Welcome to Dad Rocks, a podcast for dads who love music, made by dads who love music.
Hello and welcome to Dad Rocks, the podcast about being a dad and loving music and how the two intersect in our lives. I'm your host Josh, and today's show is one of a three-part mini-series on a very personal subject for me, my father, David Frisch. So if you're not interested in hearing about my dad, feel free to skip these episodes. But I do hope you stick around, as this was an important project for me to undertake, as you'll soon hear. If you've been a regular listener of this show, you'll know that my father was a huge influence on my life in almost every way possible. But music was probably the biggest influence my dad had on me. From the music he played in the house and in the car, to taking me to shows, to encouraging me to play music, and then eventually finding ways for my bands to perform, he had a major impact on the musical part of my life. Though he never took any formal music lessons, he had the gift of having a musical ear and taught himself how to play harmonica, then guitar, and later the dobro. On top of all of that, he was a great singer and could harmonize with almost anyone. And he loved playing music, whether in an informal jam or a scheduled gig or just for my brother and I. Music was what made him truly happy, and it was a major outlet for him, especially after a long day's work in his chiropractic practice. So why am I choosing to do this three-part mini-series on him now? Well, on February 13th, 2003, my father passed away from a heart attack, making today, if you're listening to this podcast on the day that it was released, the 20th anniversary of his death. I figured now is as good a time as any to talk to people whom my dad played music with throughout his life. The way I initially approached this was to break his performing career into three eras. His time with his high school band Powdered Milk in the late 60s, his time with the almost original synthetic urban swampgrass jug band in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and then later in the few years before his death, and his time with the band The Old Man Jam in the mid to late 90s. While my initial approach was to do something in some chronological order, two of the conversations cover multiple time periods of my dad's life, so I decided to release all three episodes at the same time, and let the listener decide how they wanted to listen to the episodes. On this episode, I talk with Glenn Taylor, who played with my dad in a group called The Old Man Jam, which would eventually evolve into a band called the Kootz, who are now one of the busiest cover bands in New Jersey. Glenn also grew up in the same town as my dad and idolized my dad's high school band Powdered Milk, so I was able to learn a little bit about my dad's early years as well. It was really great to talk to him, as he had a very unique perspective of my father and was able to tell me some things that I never knew before. So let's get to my conversation with Glenn Taylor. Glenn, welcome to Dad Rocks. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So first of all, how were your holidays this year?
Everything was great. We celebrate them all over here, and it's multiples of fun seeing the kids, the family. It's all great. It just the generations hand down, as you are finding out for yourself. It's great.
Yes, and I'm guessing you guys were packed with gigs during that week as
we
usual.
never close. The Kootz, I think we did 300 shows last year and kept our day jobs.
Wow, it's very I got to say, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the Kootz later, but like it's very impressive how you maintain so many gigs, and you yourself double, triple booking, sometimes playing 2-3 shows, especially during the summer. I give you a lot of props. And, you know, myself being in a cover band over the last couple of years, I cannot imagine doing that full time, you know, unless it's your full-time job. You know, you have your studio and right. This, I guess, you know, since your kids are grown, it's a lot easier, but
yeah, it makes a difference. I mean, but even I remember the days of when they were little and they were, you know, trying to be a good dad and be there for them. And also once in a while, you'd have to arrange a sleepover or, you know, rides and things like that. And, you know, it all worked out. I mean, they still like seeing their dad, so I guess I didn't betray them.
Yeah. So, you know, to get to the meat of this, so you and my father both grew up in Passaic, New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yep, Passaic Park, very fertile music scene.
And he was about what, 3 years older than you?
I think he graduated in '69.
Yeah.
I in '72, so he was 3 years ahead of me.
Okay. So when did you actually meet him? Because I know that later on, you guys knew each other. When did you actually meet? Did you actually know each other? Were you friends?
We knew each other. There. It's funny because as I knew I was going to be on this show with you, I thought of that moment in time. And you got to see, when you're this age, like when I met your dad again in the '90s, and he had also come in and done studio work playing harmonica for me occasionally. So I didn't lose total touch with him between high school and the '90s, but it was kind of like he was in a band called Powdered Milk, and they were, I don't know if I can say it on the podcast, but they were the shit.
Of course.
They were it.
They were also known as Powdered Shit at one point,
well,
too.
it was pure shit, actually. And I believe, to my recollection, I was just telling our friend Don Ginta that the name was changed so they could get hired. But I totally remember their gigs, and we would go to the local Y, and if they were playing the show, we had a band called Resurrection, 5 Jews in a band called Resurrection, go figure. So we stood there and watched Powdered Milk and say, wow, he's got a Leslie speaker, and this guy's got a great kit of drums, and George Beckwith is playing a Gibson SG, and we have these Sears guitars, and it was always like, that they were like the benchmark that we try to strive for, and the irony so many years later was to get to play in the beginnings of what became what I'm still doing. So it really was quite awesome in those days to have them as our heroes, basically to say like these guys, and I think to the best of my knowledge, the parents of the members of Powdered Milk were very involved in helping the band. They were definitely pro music, where a lot of parents will say, get a real job, get a real life. So it was nice to see.
Yeah. I don't know about my grandparents per se, because they passed away, when I was young. But I mean, I know my grandfather played organ, but they weren't, I'm not sure if they were big on my dad. I'm sure they would love that he was out of the house, doing stuff but I don't know exactly, I guess. I know Charlie Stein, who I'm, hoping to talk to at some point.
Oh, great.
I know his dad had a van or something, and they would, I guess, use that to move stuff, or with the gigs. And
sure.
But
And I remember the drummer Andy Polner, who he was a great drummer, but the father would always go, and he would always make sure that the drums were in the right place. I mean, they're very caring and almost like kind of like a little league dad for rock and roll.
I actually had never met the dude, and I think he responded to something you posted, Andy Polner, that is.
Really?
And I was talking to him back and forth a little bit a year or two ago, because there's a lot of stories my dad told that were not I wasn't 100% sure of.
Sure.
There was always a classic one, and I had to ask Andy about this because I asked Charlie about it too. Was this I guess he and Andy and I guess someone else saw Led Zeppelin on their second world tour at MSG, and they walked out of the show. Wow. And I wanted to make sure that was actually true. And Andy said, yeah, they were terrible that night. And because my dad hated listening to Led Zeppelin after that point.
Actually, it's funny. One of the memorable jam sessions I had with your dad, we got together at somebody's house in Clifton, New Jersey. And I'll never forget this. He goes, listen, I got to go. And I go, why? And he says, I got tickets to this concert. I think it's for Bangladesh, and it's tonight at the Garden. And your dad was lucky enough to be able to see another history-making concert, and had to leave us in the lurch with our jam session, but at least he got to see George.
Wow, crazy. Did you guys ever play together back then, or is it just more of a, you guys were in your own bands type thing?
Well, yeah, in those days, and again, what I was going to say before is, Josh, like when you were in like 6th grade, you wouldn't hang out with a 9th grader. That would be totally like verboten. But if you're 40 and you're friends with someone who's 37 or 38, it's okay, because the gap of age diminishes as you age. So I think that was a case in point with getting to know your dad when you and your brother were young. That he had these, basically the Old Man Jam came out of literally jam sessions at your house on Eagle Rock Ave, where we basically, the dads would all get together one or two times a month on a Friday night to get the hell away from the screaming kids we all had. And, it really provided. And then we started bringing other people into the mix, like Chris Bolger, who actually ended up co-conspiring with us to start the band, and guys like Ed. And even Dennis Dyken from the Smithereens. There was good exposure to really talented players. And again, I had moved from Passaic to North Caldwell in like 1985, and I just didn't know any of the musicians who were in my neck of the woods. So it was really a challenge to reach out. And then when I finally met, your dad introduced me to Chris and to Ed. And then there was a bit of a scene that I felt that I was being pulled into, and then there was the Roseland Fair that they had every year in the park by your house. So all of a sudden there were different openings to sort of say, well, I do this too, and then I had the studio all along. But again, the kind of things I was doing in the recording studio weren't necessarily getting out and playing with local guys, So
yeah. So to go back a little bit, because when the way I remember, and granted, it's just thinking about it, for the first 10 years of my life, I didn't know my dad played rock music. I know he liked listening to it. He was always in the jug band, like he was always in the jug. I mean, granted, I'm also young. I don't really know what's going on with my dad. Like after we go to bed, but that's the band that I knew he was in. The only time I saw him play music really was playing with the guys from his bluegrass jug band,
right? Urban swamp grass, right? Or swamp gas.
Yes. But around like the time when I started playing drums around I was 9, on my 10th birthday, my dad got me my first drum set, and that was around the same time as the Caldwell Street Fair started getting going, and he was in charge of the music there, and he wanted live music. Now, so the Old Man what the jam session you're talking about became this band Old Man Jam. What was, do you recall the conversations or how it all started? Was it literally like, my dad realizing, oh, I have now a kid who plays, rock music again. I have a drum set at my house. Who wants to come play at the house? Or was it due to the street fair? Was it, which influenced the other?
I think, Josh, the jam sessions came first because, again, that was our respite. And then somewhere about a year into these regular, they weren't like, perfectly scheduled, but, about once or twice a month. And then so, hey, I think David was very, involved with the Kiwanis, and he said, hey, I got a chance for us to actually play a gig. You guys interested? Sure, why not? And again, I was playing gigs all through high school and college, got married, moved here in 1985, had my first kid in 1987, and I just stopped playing gigs. And I remember bands used to come into the studio and say, oh yeah, I got in at 4 a.m. for my gig. And I said, I'll never do that again. I'm so glad I don't do it. And then when your dad said, hey, we have a chance to play this gig, and okay, what the hell, it's a Sunday afternoon, and I believe you still have some excellent footage of some of the early ones.
Yeah, I do.
Which was awesome to hear how far we've come and what we've learned from that. But it's priceless though.
You got 5 guys from the synagogue basically playing initially, and
exactly.
but granted, you're a great player. Ben's a great player. Was it Gary Cabler was on?
Gary Cabler was the original drummer, but we had him. We had Tony Denti, who lived down the street from you. And even
there was Chris. I think there was some guy Chris also at some point.
Oh yeah, he was from Roseland. Yeah, I know who you mean. He had he played some of the. We used to do barbecues in your backyard on Memorial Day. That was a big jam session, and actually another Passaic guy who I think you might remember, who gave you some drum lessons, Jerry Polchi from the Four Seasons. Yep. He actually played a couple of the street fair gigs with us too. So we had a revolving door, and that I think is very rooted in the fact that the band as it carries on from the days of the Old Man Jam is a multiplayer rotation. It's not like a set band. And I think I got a lot of that from David.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing I wanted to ask, because, regarding like that original band, there was kind of like a revolving door of drummers and keyboard players, but you, my dad, and Ben were like, the mainstays, were the core of that that group. Was there any reason to that, or was it just that's how it was? Because I remember getting pulled up one time. Maybe I think Ed Olstrom was playing with you guys at a street fair, and he asked me to come up, and like I ended up playing "Rain" by the Beatles with like I don't know. It was just one of those weird things that for some reason like it seemed like you guys could. I guess till Tony came into the picture,
Right.
you guys really didn't find a solid drummer.
When it started being the Old Man Jam, I think pre-Old Man Jam, you had that guy Chris who played drums, and you had there was another guy who played keyboards. And they kind of burned off. And then when Tony came to town, like, wow, here's a guy who's a great drummer. He sings lead, which for a drummer, as you know, that's not as common as you might see. Ed was in the beginning, and he was peripherally in and out. Chris Bolger was huge. And then we started, because again, all the bands I had been in back in the day, like when I knew your dad in growing up in Passaic, in my band, I was the guy who would call the recreation director at the Y or talk to the dance committee chairman at the school and try to, I always had a knack for, all my life I've been selling it, like whether it be the studio or a band. So I'm not afraid to pick up a phone. So what happened was, we kind of ran with it. And then, and even your dad, after a while, I picked the pace up a little bit. I kind of took his cue. And I think it was the genesis of the rotation came from the fact that, we all had kids. Not everybody could play every show. Nor did they care to, and I think that kind of and then there was a show that one of the Chris Bolger could not play, so he goes, I know this guy, he knows a lot of the same songs I know, and he showed up at one of our gigs. He sat in, and I go, oh my God, this guy's great. So then you realize the life is a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get, is very applicable to a band, and it's exciting for fans of the band too, because and to this day if you see a band frequently and they play the same set and they have the same shtick, it's really boring. And when you sub the players out, and also one of the things I learned is that anybody who doesn't sing lead is dead weight in the band, because you're trying to keep it small so you can make a few dollars. Not that we're doing it for the money, but so typically a small 4 or 5 piece band has a better shot at making a few bucks if everybody sings and everybody plays. Like your dad played harmonica, he played guitar. I play keyboards, I play guitar. Everybody sings. So all of a sudden, 3 or 4 guys can sound like 7 or 8. And that definitely makes the band more attractive sonically, for sure.
Yeah. Now, in that initial, those jam sessions, which became that band that played at the street fair and whatever, Old Man Jam, was it more of a collective, or was my dad initially the de facto leader? Or what, because I try to get an understanding, there's video of him like kind of yelling at guys, what key we're in and everything like that. And what was he like? Was he like kind of, I don't know, was he the band leader? What was he like in the band himself? He
was kind of like the Mike Love of the Beach Boys. He was kind of the guy out front, and I think it's almost like David adapted this mindset of, well, no one else is gonna do it, so I better, and we, your dad commanded our respect. Plus we were all friends, so that's it's different when you have a band that's constructed of friendships, and like the music thing was like, okay, well, we're still friends, so. It actually is also a good way to end friendships. But a lot of that fell on your dad, because initially, again, he was the one that said, hey, I got a chance for us to play somewhere. And so we kind of looked at him as the fearless leader at the outset, I'm not sure how it worked in the high school band Powdered Milk, but when Old Man Jam started getting it together, David was kind of the fearless leader.
In that same line of thinking, what made you enjoy playing with him? Like, what made you enjoy being in a band with him?
He knew what he was doing. Again, I hadn't been in bands. I graduated college in '75 and started my studio business. So when I got pulled back, and I unfortunately got divorced in about 1996, and I think that extra time on my hands, which was unwilling but looking to be filled pretty regularly, mm-hmm. It was a welcome activity. And I think when again, because David, he was kind of, I wouldn't say sure of himself, because that's a little too strong of a term, but mm-hmm. He didn't stop doing what he was doing. He still loved it, and I kind of was like, oh yeah, this is fun again. And I kind of got, like they say in the guy that played, pull me right back in again. So it was it wasn't quite eye opening, but it was kind of like a reacclimation to like, wow, yeah, and because David he wasn't like a taskmaster. It wasn't like he didn't make it a draconian experience to be in a band with, because the band never was taken that seriously till probably later on. We because I'd say we started percolating with this thing where we do the street fair, we do the country fair and all that. And that was probably around 96, 97, 98. But it wasn't until about 2000 where one day Chris Bolger came over, and because we were all playing in other bands too by that point. And he said, and I wasn't particularly happy with the band I was in, because I was with a guy who was like a dictator. And, I mean, just it's a long story we don't have to go into. But the long story short, Bolger came over one day and he said, let's make this the main thing we're doing. And I think that was the point at which David, as soon as it became structured, that was the balloon burst for David, because I think the informality of it is what was attractive to him. He was never like a guy who stood on ceremony. You know what I mean? He was loose, and that was the beauty of it. And then we had to go mess it up by trying to get serious with it.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask, because my dad always talked about how it was a story, and he obviously blew it up, or I misheard him, but he always told this story, and I'll just tell the way I remember it, which I was told is not accurate. That his band Powdered Milk was asked by somebody from Fantasy Records to sign a recording deal or something like that, which I found out later that was not true. I think maybe they were asked to like open for somebody or something. I don't know. But his story is that everyone in the band was ready to go to college, and they decided that it was more important for them to go to college than it was to be a rock band.
Wow. What foresight.
That was, I don't know. Again, I don't know. I gotta find out and do some more digging about that. But that was the story he told. And he always, the way he's told to me is like, I don't want to make something I love become a job. The minute it becomes a job, that's when it's no longer fun. And I probably took that too much to heart when I was younger, not studying music when I probably should have, maybe gotten a little more in depth in studying music. Whereas my brother, thankfully, he followed his passions and, has become successful. But, at that time, I believe your first gig was at the County Line Pub in Fairfield or Pinebrook. I'm not sure where, if that was, I know some of your first gigs were there.
That was the first one in Fairfield. And I still have a picture of the first gig. And if you go, it's even on the Kootz website if you go to the archive photos.
I think it was you, my dad, Ben, Chris, Ed Ostrom, was Dennis Dyken on drums?
Yes,
on that
Dennis
one?
was on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so, like, as you said, kind of the bubble kind of burst, for my dad, because he felt that, why are we monetizing something or making this a job when it should just be fun? Did you have any conversations with him about that? Or, like, what was it, anything you tried to say to him to kind of influence him to maybe think a different way about it?
What I remember, Josh, was that when I would ask him, once that happened, because at that point in time, which I believe was February of, it was either 2000 or 2001. I know it was. Yeah. It was. It might have been 2000.
It was late in my high school career. It was like late in my high school career, possibly. Yeah. It was before I graduated. I remember that.
And I think and I think what happened was, again, I started asking him about like, hey, I got us a gig here and I got us a gig there. You want to play? And I know he did a gig. We played down at the Liberty Tavern in Union. And at the outset, he went along on some of these, but because he didn't play every single one, it became apparent to me that there has to be some cards to shuffle in the band lineup deck. But I didn't want to be in 10 bands. So the light bulb for me was, let's call all the 10 bands the same band and market it under one banner. And I think that, but I think you're right. I think David didn't want to make it a job, and I'll tell you, to this day, now this is we're commemorating 20 years, and it's still fun, but it comes with there's a lot of responsibility. Plus the times are different, and everybody wants you to have liability insurance, and everybody's afraid of a lawsuit, and I think if your dad had been here to see all that, he might have lost interest even at a faster rate of descent because it got everything became very official. And I think the organic nature of what the Old Man Jam was back when we were in the basement days, transitioning into the early loose gigs, I mean, I've learned so much about it's in this conversation as we're speaking. I'm realizing all the things that I've learned about what makes a band, I guess, desirable on that commercial level. If you're, because the New Jersey, New York tri-state music scene is very fertile. There are lots of gigs to be had. You're not going to make a lot of money. And again, fortunately for me, I don't do it for the money. I would do it for free, to be honest with you, because I love playing. And but I think knowing that you have to, I got this weekend, I have 3 gigs I got to do. I don't mind that, but it's the point of life. Now, again, at the point of life we were starting out, everybody had young kids. You among them, my daughter's among them. So, I think so. Once that gigs lined up, as far as the eye could see, was kind of a turnoff to him, and I'd have to go back in the picture books, but I know that he was doing it a little less and less, and he obviously had a full-time practice going as well. So it's a little self-indulgent to like throw your whole life into it. So everything has to be in perspective. But there'll probably come a day for me too when it's like, well, this is just like a lot. The years when the informality of the Old Man Jam was at a time when the kids were little. Now the reason, if my kids stayed that age forever, if only they could, right? But the fact that there's a lot of empty nesters, and the problem is actually there's a glut of bands because all these fat old guys have classic rock bands and they're playing the same 10 songs. And, and I don't want to sound like a snob, but I think the pedigree of having come from a professional audio background, I'm very organized. And it's almost like taking the best and the joy of what I learned working with David and catapulting that forward within the framework of something that's a pretty efficiently well-run machine. And I'm just, it's a disease because I guess when you do, I do production, obviously audio production, there's somewhat, you can't be loosey-goosey with that. And there's a discipline that carries over to other parts of your life. And, I've always said, to consumers like fans, it must be so great. You're in this rock and roll band, and it's a party, and you guys are drinking and getting high, and you're just all the time. And I said, make no mistake, because your good time is my work. And I embrace it totally, Josh, but the line is very easily blurred because they think it's this big party, and that's good marketing because you want to associate that party with, like, if you hang out with the Old Man Jam or you hang out with the Kootz, you're going to have a great time. But when it comes down to brass tacks, you cannot make the mistake that it's a lifestyle. It's kind of an illusion, and marketing is everything. You sell the sizzle, not the steak. And so I always, especially now, social media wasn't around when we started, but I have totally, it's probably like a third job because I get home from a gig and I'm on 3 hours posting videos and photos and talking about the next gig. But I think successful marketing is to make the consumer want to press his nose up to that showroom window and say, man, I wish I could get on the other side of this glass and be part of what they're doing. And I do it with my studio. I do it with the Kootz. And actually, I like to mention this too because if you ever go to thekootz.com, which is the homepage, you see a cartoon that was drawn by Tony's wife, Andrea Dente, about 20-some-odd years ago. And that guy is David, sitting on the bass drum. And so he's kind of looking over us the whole way down. And, maybe he's saying, I wouldn't be on this gig. And he's, but I'm still casting an eye. And that's why, after what happened 20 years ago when we lost him, I didn't want to, somebody, I can make you a really nice looking homepage image. I'm like, what? I like this. And I like that this is what it was in the beginning. So there is still a connection, even though things have changed. I don't forget that stuff. And again, it's even deeper because I had the chance to be wowed by how great David's Powdered Milk Band was and Hope to Aspire. So, like I said, when I got the call and say, hey, you're going to jam with David, I'm like, oh my God, it's like the audience with the Pope.
Now, you mentioned earlier, and I tried to do this chronologically, but I'm just remembering something you mentioned. Did you play with him before? Like, because you mentioned some jam session in
The
Clifton.
Bangladesh day was actually the absolute hinge on which the door turned, because so I think somebody who knew me that was bringing him, and I said, David Frisch from Powdered Milk's going to be there? I'm there, man. And I brought my Fender Twin Reverb and my SG, and I was like nervous. I was nervous about a jam session. I mean, I don't even know. You know what? I don't even remember the other musicians on it, but I do remember that David was on it. And, that was the first time I actually remember playing music with him. Because, again, when we talked about that ratio earlier of like a ninth grader wouldn't hang out with a seventh grader or whatever. Right. So when they had their band going full steam, we were like little peons in ninth grade, like, I wish I could have a band like that. So we never really got to step up to the plate with them because they were the big leagues. We were the minor leagues. And then, back in 1970, I believe, August 1st, 1970, if I'm not mistaken, that might have been the date.
That up now.
Right, but that date of the Bangladesh concert was in the daytime, was when I finally got to, play music with your dad and step up to the plate, so to speak.
It was it was August 1st, 71.
71, okay. I was off by a year.
So he must have been home from college. Yeah.
Might have been Charlie on that too, playing some keys. I really don't remember it. It's so vague. But
yeah. But that is that the only time you guys played before you guys started jamming in the basement of my house?
Yeah, I think so. That there was another. Well, again, I started my recording studio when I was still living in my parents' home in Passaic. Then it was called If Walls Could Talk Studios, and get a little scene set. If I'm not being too verbose, you can cut this out. But the drinking age in New Jersey had just been lowered to 18 in 1977, I think. So all of a sudden, every bar, every club was having music 7 nights a week. It was like an orgy. There were so many bands, and I had been trying to make my way as a singer-songwriter. I asked my father, I said, can you loan me $2,000? I'm going to buy a 4-track TAC reel-to-reel, make my own demos at home, spot me a year or two in the basement, and I'll go get a real job if nothing happens. So all of a sudden, they lower the drinking age. All these bands are looking for a studio. My father says, why don't you monetize what you've done? Your recordings sound pretty good, even though I don't have a musical ear, but... So there was a little publication that ran in the Bergen-Passaic County area called the Want Ad Press. It was a little rag that people sold their cars and their garden tools, but there was a music section for amps and guitars. So I think it was $5 for 2 weeks. I put a little ad, said we'll record your band's demo for $10 an hour, and I got swamped. And all of a sudden, I discovered making money, and I'm like, wow, I get to do what because I always loved the production more than the writing of the songs, It's probably why my stuff was very mediocre, because I couldn't wait to record it. So I'm saying, so these guys are coming in and they're asking me what I think. And all of a sudden, that was the beginning of getting a producer ear, and oh, you're playing a lead solo over the guy's vocal. You probably want to lay back till it's the solo. And so for $10 an hour, it started adding up. I'm working at home. I'm not paying rent. And then I start setting, okay, maybe I'll go from 4-track to 16-track and then 24-track. And now the studio's too small. Let me move to Caldwell in 1985. And, so I wasn't playing music on a regular basis out. I think maybe I'd do 1 or 2 gigs a year, like here and there. If a band called me, hey, we can't get anybody, can you do it? And I'm like, I'll muck my way through it. But then, the thing that your dad represented was an organized, legitimate chance to play music live with other players who wanted to do the same thing. And that was just incredibly cool. And again, because I had a little more time on my hands at the time than I wanted to, because I only, obviously the every other week thing with the kids and here and there. So I that sounds good. Friday nights at the Frisch residence, and we'll jam, have a few beers, and, just have a great time. And it was a great time for sure. Have fun memories.
Did he do any session work with you before this, or is this?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. From the day from the time of the 1971 infamous Bangladesh jam till we started convening in 20 years later in the 90s, there were several occasions where I was, and I knew that I was aware of your dad's harmonica ability, and I had called him, I know, at least a couple of times, and your mom, who he was dating at the time, even I remember her coming to the session, and him doing the harp parts and blues harp, and it was just really cool. It was like one of my first hiring your dad. Actually, I think it was for a whopping $25. was one of the first experiences I had with contracting, because again, I play guitar, bass, drums a little bit. I mean. So a songwriter could come in and I could sort of like help them do what they're doing. But then, but I need a harmonica here. Oh, I don't do that. And that was my first experience as a procurer of talent or contracting. Well, I know this guy Dave. He's a really good harmonica player. And he came down with Paula, and I have very vivid memories of that session. 'Cause I was producing a girl from California who had the boyfriend with the big bucks, and he goes, he gave me a lot of money for a week of my time and said, just make sure you can produce 4 or 5 songs in a week. I'll give you a blank check, and great, I can hire David. He'll pay for it. So it was a very cool experience, and got to stay in touch. So I wouldn't say I fell totally out of touch with your pops, but
Right.
but once I moved into the area, all his Passaic people moved to West Essex, and we were in the shadow of each other. So yeah, it was kind of like the familiarity was a nice touch to go into doing jams with.
I mean, I had no idea he didn't like any of this. This is why I've been trying to want these conversations, because there's a lot of stories. Because he passed away when I was 19, and even though he told some stuff, there's a lot of stuff that I never asked about or he never brought up, and it just never came to mind. So now, I never knew he did session work. Like, again, this is kind of cool stuff. Now, when I know at right before he passed, or right around around that time, the Kootz were becoming the Kootz, or had become the Kootz.
Right.
But you guys put out an album. I know it didn't come out till after he passed away. Was that like an attempt to do original music, or what was the impetus behind that? And how much of that was my father on? I mean, I've heard some of it. I think my mom has the CDs at home.
She got the first one. I came from the pressing plant to your house and handed her the first one, and with a big thank you. And I think what happened with that was, David just kind of missed the boat, but we sort of a la John Lennon, Free as a Bird, posthumously had a track of him playing, and we superimposed his harmonica playing on a blues track that we did with Dennis Steichen, and Ed played Wurlitzer electric piano. Yeah, I played, and as a matter of fact, your father also introduced me, and I don't know if anybody in your family still has the National Resonator guitar.
Oh, we have it. It's a little bit broken, and my brother and I have been talking about sending it to either National or somebody who can.
I got somebody for you. We can talk about that. Right in Caldwell, actually. He's awesome. But I bought one. Probably a lot more money now, but it was about $1,500, and I just thought it was the coolest sound. And again, your dad's influence. I just used it on a track with an artist in the studio last week. I said, this is the coolest guitar. It's like a dobro, but it's like a Les Paul combined, and you can mix how much of each one you want. And every time I look at that thing, I think of your dad, and because he turned me on to that. And, it was, like I said, I don't even think he realized a lot of eye-opening things that, he left for us. It was like kind of crumbs in the forest that we followed. And that was a very influential instrument. And so when we were doing the album, in 2005, we recorded an album called Tales from the Endless Bus Tour of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to do some choice covers, like deep cuts, but we also wanted to do some of our own. So Chris Bolger contributed about 5 songs. A couple of other members contributed their own. We did actually Tommy James from Tommy James and the Shondells, who was still a client of mine here, was good enough to do. It was nice because we had Dennis from the Smithereens, we had Tommy James, and I always felt if we put enough oddities or guests, or why would these people play on this record? Who the hell are the Kootz? That it might attract a little attention. And actually, we've sold about 3,500 of them since 2005. I mean, because we were always playing gigs, and the little CD rack is there, and we only sell them for $5, so people can take it home like a piece of candy.
And I did actually look before. It's on Spotify too. I think it's on all of the major streaming services as well. Yeah, but but this one song, your father used to have a blue Volkswagen, as you might recall. Well, we called the song Blue Beetle.
and I believe Chris Bolger had a rhythm track. It was kind of a bow to like doom 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 doom, and we had this thing, and I think we had bass and drums. I don't even know who played on it. Now, Dennis played the drums. It was done in another studio, but Chris brought the multi-track. We transferred it into digital, and then we added this, the National Steel guitar that you're, which was another tip of the cap, and then we had this. I'm not sure where we pulled the harmonica from, but he was jamming in the same key that we did the song in, and so we put that in Pro Tools so we could chop it up and synchronize it to the music digital audio workstation. And,
I mean, I remember you guys, sorry to interrupt, but like I remember you back in the Old Man Jam days, you guys did record at your studio. I remember like a demo tape or some sort of
I have one,
recording.
and I'll be happy to make one for you because it was all cover tunes, and I think, like some Allman Brothers and stuff where David could be on. That was Chris Howe. Now I just remember the drummer you mentioned.
Okay.
Chris Howe, Howe. He was on it, and this other guy, I forget his name, he played keyboard, and then David, Ben, and myself. And we came in, we just plugged in everything live, no overdubbing, just live to a DAT digital tape. And we did about 7 or 8 songs in a night, vocals and everything. And I still have it. And
so it wouldn't have come from those sessions though, that session, right? The harmonica track.
The Blue Beetle was kind of a premeditated tribute to your dad because he wasn't with us to finish the record. And even though his involvement had waned a little bit from the band and playing out, almost like Brian Wilson didn't do Beach Boys gigs after a while, but he was still, the granddaddy of it. And, I never felt David was excluded from anything right all the way till the end. And, we tried to create this track so he could. As a matter of fact, we from the very session that you were talking about where we did the live demo here. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think what it says at the end of the song. He goes, so I think he says pretty good for a demo, and we took that little slice off the cassette tape and stuck that on the Blue Beetle track. Like at the end, it has like a flourish and an end, and you hear the drums go brump, and then we cut it in. Not bad for a demo or what something to that effect. And we wanted to feel like he was on. It was kind of under his watch. It was really sweet and good collection of songs. And ironically, people. A quick funny story. That's an aside. That you tell people we worked for 2 years making this CD. And we have all these cool guest stars and all these odd covers and some great original songs, and then look at the CD, they go, "Where's Brown Eyed Girl?" So I said, I'm gonna fix their ass. And the next CD I bought a Zoom recorder when they first came out. I recorded gigs for about 5 or 6 months, took the best sounding 20 tracks, put them together on a live record. Sounds like someone's basement demo, and called it Kootleg, which has its own legacy, like bootleg. And as soon as people saw that, they started buying both CDs. So one helped out the other, but
cool.
It was great.
One thing I've always thought about, and we're gonna start wrapping it up, is if my father hadn't passed away when he did, do you think that he would have still played gigs, or do you think like maybe when he retired he would have played more gigs with you guys, or do you think that he would have just stayed and done the same thing that he was doing, which was like, if he was around, had kind of felt that you asked him to come play, he'd pop in type of deal?
I think the latter, and I also think that because these days the great thing about what we are doing now, and I'm coming back to what you're saying is, we'll play some I say there's 2 kinds of audiences for a cover music, or any music really. The ones that love the beat and the ones that love the band. And you could play, you could play some innocuous, horrible song that's danceable and people don't care who's playing it. But we still maintain a couple of like small dessert venues or a coffee house. I think it's important for us to keep those shows. We play them acoustic with no drums or just hand percussion, guitar, bass. And I have a feeling if David had still been around, he would have relished the coffee house, the up close, the living room concert vibe. There's a couple of places now that have a very chill kind of atmosphere. Like the emphasis is on the music. There's no dinners. There's no TVs like so many bars that everybody plays in. So I think David would have said yes to some of those shows. An occasional. I think he would, if he played like 4 times a year, he'd probably be fine with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, Glenn, before I let you go, first off, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate this. This is a lot of stuff I didn't know about my father, and this is why I wanted to hear this and just kind of get a sense of him, outside of being my father, but being someone who played music and all that and stuff. But for the listening audience who may not know of the Kootz or where to check you guys out, where can they find you on social media, on the web, and all that stuff? Oh, sure.
Well, if they go to the website, which is kind of the be-all, tell-all of everything we do, that's www.thekootz.com, thekootz.com. We are, if you search the Kootz Band on Instagram and the Kootz Rock and Roll with Fiber on Facebook, or just type in Kootz, because I don't think anything else is spelled that way, except the one woman who lives in England and discovered us, and she sends me a Facebook message, and she says, "My name is Hedda Kootz, and my family is having a reunion. Can I buy 50 T-shirts from you?" so there are Kootz, but what Kootz is basically, again, your dad's lingering legacy, kind of like a crusty old guy who says, "Get off my lawn," or if he's annoyed, he doesn't want to do something. And, when I think, what's a Koot? I think of David, but when I explain it to a general public kind of person, I just say, Webster spells it C-O-O-T, like you old coot. And we just made it a little bit zany with the K-O-O-T-Z. And
a little bit Yiddish, right? A little bit Yiddish.
Exactly. It's a very Hamish kind of version of Kootz. So your dad is still watching us. His spirit is with us. We miss him a lot. And it's kind of fun to think of where he would have fit into this. But I don't think he would have abandoned it. I think he would have always embraced to play. He loved playing music. So yeah, he sure would have come back to that.
Well, Glenn, thanks again for coming on to the show. Really appreciate talking to you. And thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Josh. You take care. God bless you all.
Thanks. Bye.
All right,
I really want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the podcast. Again, this was an important project for me to do to remember my father, so I hope you get a sense of what type of person and musician he was and found the stories about him and the people he played music with interesting and enjoyable. And if you haven't already listened to the other episodes of this miniseries, I hope you do. Now, whether this is your first time or you've been listening since the beginning, I really appreciate everyone checking out the podcast and would really love for you to subscribe to the show and maybe give it a review or, just tell a friend about us. If you'd like to follow the show on social media, we're on Instagram and Twitter, both at Dad Rocks Pod, as well as on Facebook by searching up Dad Rocks Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or any show ideas for us, or just want to give us a shout, you can always email us at dadrockspod@gmail.com. Now, before I go, I'd like to say something. If your dad is still alive, give him a call, shoot him a text. Just tell him you love him. And if you have kids, give them a hug and tell them the same thing. You never know when you won't have that opportunity again. So, I want to say thank you again for listening. And remember, dads, you rock. And Dad, I love you.
good for me.